Good day everyone. For today's lesson, we will be discussing the topic of vehicle simulations. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to learn about the following: definition of vehicle simulations, features and mechanics of vehicle simulations, game environment requirements of vehicle simulations, suitable camera angles for vehicle simulations, and behavior of artificial opponents in vehicle simulations. What are vehicle simulations? Vehicle simulations cover several environments and game mechanics. Vehicle simulations can be in the air, on the ground, on water, or in space. Vehicle simulations can include races against other players or artificially intelligent opponents, or they can involve exploration or simply the experience of using the vehicle. Game features. The player's role in a flight simulator is that of a pilot. If you're going to simulate larger aircrafts such as bombers or two-seat fighters, you'll have to decide how you want to handle the varying roles such as the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, electronic warfare specialist, and offensive weapons officer. In racing-oriented driving games, the player's role is that of a racing driver most of the time, but the more serious simulations also allow the player to be a mechanic, modifying the angle of the airfoils, changing tires to compensate for weather conditions, and so on. The competition modes of military flight simulators are single-player modes against artificial opponents, multiplayer deathmatches, and team-based play. Civilian flight simulators usually offer only a single-player mode, although they sometimes also allow races and follow-my-lead competitions. Driving simulators are generally single-player games or multiplayer races and are seldom team-based. Both military flight simulators and organized race driving simulators often include a career mode in which the player creates a pilot or driver to rack up victories. These games also include campaign modes that require collecting points or completing a series of missions. Most military flight simulators offer a series of missions, often with primary and secondary objectives such that achieving either or both of them constitutes victory. Being killed or having the player's plane shot down constitutes a loss. Civilian flight simulators seldom include any victory conditions unless they implement racing or tests of flying ability. Organized racing simulations take their gameplay from the real thing. The challenge is primarily to win races without crashing. Core mechanics. The easiest way to design a variety of opponents in a vehicle simulation is simply to provide different drivers' vehicles with different performance characteristics. However, once the player figures it out, the opponent is easily beaten. Design the AI for these opponents by starting with perfect performance and then creating variations from perfection. Comical or arcade-like racing sims may not simulate damage at all. If the car hits something, it simply bounces off, although doing so usually slows the car down. Other games model damage as a single variable, like unit health points in a war game. When damage reaches a certain level, the vehicle simply stops running. To model damage accurately, you should divide the vehicle into separate areas that can suffer damage in a collision, and decide how that damage affects the performance of the vehicle. The settings of flight simulators consist of the plane itself and the ground that it flies above. Most flight sims do not offer interesting terrain. Driving simulators are set on either racetracks or roads except for a few off-road simulators that offer the fun of bouncing all over interesting terrain without having to steer carefully. Weather is a critical factor to consider when designing the settings of both flight and driving simulators. Rain plays a strategic role in automobile racing because each driver needs to switch to rain tires, which hold the road better. Other vehicles. Most boat simulations are of powerboats or jet skis, offering the same kinds of speed thrills that driving simulators do. The handling characteristics of powerboats differ from those of cars. Powerboat simulations usually offer racing over a twisting course marked off by buoys. Jet ski or fantasy water vehicle simulations often have outrageous jumps and other challenges as well. Submarine simulations are fairly popular because of the specialized nature of their situation and because they can move in 3 dimensions. While sailing simulations and ship simulations with complex ocean models are rare. Tank simulations seldom implement the complexity of real tank battles. Like military flight simulators, tank simulators are typically about a lone tank operating against other tanks and a variety of other enemies. The most interesting characteristic of a tank is its rotating turret, which enables it to shoot in directions other than the one in which it is facing. A popular alternative is the mech, which is a science fiction cousin to the tank that is usually depicted as a large armed and armored walking machine that can carry all sorts of imaginary weapons and hardware, and they can be optimized for single-player play. The majority of spacecraft simulations are science fiction, and they typically consist of either fighter planes in space or capital ship simulations. The fighter types are simple action games with only a few variables to manage: fuel, ammunition, damage, and shields. Capital ship simulations are more strategic, giving the player control of a wide range of weapons and other equipment. Intellectual property rights. As a general rule, you can depict and simulate military equipment without obtaining permission from their manufacturers, because such machines are not sold to the general public or generally exploited in the marketplace in any other way. If you are going to simulate an existing car and use its real name and logo, you must have a license from the manufacturer. The presentation layer. The interaction model in a vehicle simulator is quite straightforward. The player's vehicle is their avatar. The machine's controls are mapped onto the computer's input devices, and the player's view is normally that of the pilot or driver, forward through the cockpit windows. Both driving and flight simulators implement certain standard views: pilot's or driver's view, view of pilot or driver from the cockpit or driver's seat. Cockpit removed view, view of pilot or driver out of the front of the vehicle. Chase view, exterior view of the vehicle from behind. Rear, side, and front views, exterior view of the vehicle from all 4 sides. Free roaming camera, instant replay mode offers this view, enables camera to be moved in any direction. The following views are found only in military flight simulators: ground target view, a view of the target on the ground that is currently selected for attack. Bomb or missile view, the point of view from a recently released bomb or missile, as if it had a camera in its nose. The following views are found only in driving simulators: trackside view, view can be either locked to a specific location or made to track the player's car as it moves past. Grandstand view, this is the traditional spectator's view of the finish line. Blimp view, a high aerial view looking straight down onto the racetrack or course, letting you see all the cars at once. Flight simulators usually reduce the number of instruments in the cockpit and the number of functions that some of them perform. Flight simulators commonly simplify navigation as well. Another common simplification that almost all flight simulators make is to produce automatically coordinated flight. In driving simulations, the sense of speed is created by the following: speedometer, driving surface variations, roadside objects, and sounds. Summary. Vehicle simulations require a designer to knowledgeably represent a known physical world in a realistic manner to the player. The most critical things for you to consider after you choose your audience are the vehicle characteristics, the opponent behaviors, and finally, the design of the courses or tracks within the game. Vehicle simulations can be highly technical and challenging, and a dedicated designer must be prepared to undertake a lot of research. The material used for this lesson was taken from Chapter 17 of the book Fundamentals of Game Design, 2nd edition, by Ernest Adams. Thanks for listening.